All right. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started, folks. I hope everybody had some generative convos in those strategy sessions. I was hearing some cool things as folks were trickling out. This is our final session of the day, our final plenary, titled Fighting for Full Freedom, Mass-supervision and Prison Expansion. Before I jump in, I just want to draw your attention to, we remixed the banner out back here. But this, as came up in some of the sessions, we really got to support one another, especially in these moments where we're coming across state to connect and synergize between our different campaigns. But, some folks, if you were in the participatory defense campaign, you probably heard about the Free Mississippi 5 campaign. Well, that link, that QR code, if it does work on your phone, it'll take you to a petition that's urging the state governor to give clemency to the Mississippi 5. So at some point, if you can hit that, if not, there's a bit.ly right under there. All right. So let's jump right in. Realizing true release from punishment requires us to address the many ways punishment continues after incarceration. So right now, we're going to hear directly from folks who've navigated this and with advocacy from different vantage points about how this system continues to impact communities. In particular, how it is used to surveil, but also how that punishment paradigm that we know is true with prisons continues after release. How these systems play an integral role in the prison system more broadly, and how folks are mobilizing to resist and challenge them. So, in terms of who we have here on this amazing panel, I'm going to start with Khalif. Khalif, would you mind raising your hand? Khalif is the executive director and founder of Project Sound Off, a nonprofit organization that empowers people and organizations in the fight for fairness and reform of the criminal legal system. Project Sound Off works to educate the public about the legal system and how it affects families, crime victims, and people both inside and outside of prison. Khalif is the main central figure in Ben Austin, who was in the Tough on Crime Paradigm Challenging Narrative session, is the main central character in Ben Austin's book, who was highlighted in a book titled Correction, Parole, Prison, and the Possibility of Change. Khalif was released on parole in February 2021 after being falsely imprisoned for 50 years. He's also a motivational speaker and community activist, and I can say that I can verify that directly as somebody who continues to inspire me and motivate me as an advocate to continue throwing down for my communities. To my immediate left, sorry, we're hopping around. Give it up for Khalif. To my immediate left, we have Latanya Jennifer Sublett, who is the director of Holistic and Liberatory Peer Reentry at the Chicago Torture Justice Center, a community-based organization that addresses the trauma of police violence and institutionalized racism by providing access to healing and wellness services, trauma-informed services, and community connection. At 19 years old, Latanya experienced abuse and torture at the hands of the Chicago police and was sentenced to 40 years in the IDOC, Illinois Department of Corrections, for a crime she did not commit. During her 21-year incarceration, she studied law, business, and social justice. She also earned 2 bachelor's degrees, and upon her release in October of 2013, she began working at Dawson Technical Institute as a recovery coach and an employment specialist, serving clients who were formerly incarcerated in recovery, veterans with disabilities. Can we give it up for Latanya? To Latanya's left, we have Chesa Boudin. Chesa is the founding executive director of Berkeley's Criminal Law and Justice Center. We got some New York fans over here. Yes. Yes, for folks who don't know, no apology necessary. Kathy is a anchor to the criminal legal reform movement, criminal justice movement, nationally, but also especially in New York, as one of the co-founders of the Beyond the Bars conference, among a plethora of other amazing things. So there's a rich legacy and history that we're bringing in the room here. And that extends to Chessa, her son. So Chessa is the founding executive director of Berkeley's Criminal Law and Justice Center, a hub for research, education, and advocacy. The center blends a data-driven approach with zealous advocacy, offering empirical insights into the intricacies of the legal system and policy outcomes. Chessa served as San Francisco's elected DA, district attorney, from 2020 until his recall in 2022. During that time, Chessa implemented bold reforms to ensure that the criminal legal system delivered safety and justice for all San Franciscans. His achievements include a significant expansion of the office's Victim Services Division, eliminating prosecutors' use of money bail, prosecuting police for excessive force, suing the manufacturers of ghost guns, expanding diversion to address root causes of crime, and a historic reduction in incarceration. During his time in office, both violent and nonviolent crime fell by double digits. Prior to his election, Chessa clerked for 2 federal judges and worked for years as a deputy public defender in San Francisco. His biological parents spent a combined 62 years in prison, starting when he was a baby. Let's give it up for Chessa. And last but certainly not least, on our end here, we have Ken Nixon from Safe and Just Michigan. Ken is the Director of Community Outreach and Partnerships at Safe and Just Michigan, a nonprofit organization that works to reduce the harm caused by both crime and incarceration by advancing evidence-based reforms that improve public safety and eliminate unnecessary correction spending. Ken was wrongfully convicted, serving 16 years before his release from prison in 2021. Let's give it up for Ken. All right, Ken, I'm going to go ahead and we'll start with you. For this first question, I just want to start big picture, broad, and offer you a chance to kind of contextualize how did you come to this work, and why is this work issue important to you?
I came to this work following my exoneration. After I was exonerated, I suffered with a lot of different governmental problems. Things such as getting vital documents. I didn't have a birth certificate or a state ID or a social security card when I came home. It would eventually take me about 6 months to gather all 3 documents. But navigating that process, I personally had a lot of help. A lot. I had lawyers, I had family, I had business people, I had legislators trying to help me gather these documents, and it still took me about 6 months to gather a state ID. The reality is you can't get a state ID without a birth certificate. You can't get a birth certificate without a social security card. You can't get a social security card without a birth certificate and an ID. Exactly, right? And again, I had a ton of help for me. So, as I navigated this process, I started to think about all the people that didn't have that same amount of help. All the people that didn't have the mental wherewithal to navigate that process. So, paying attention to my own struggles as I navigated my own reentry, I quickly realized there was a lot of overlap between people that were innocent and people that were guilty coming out of prison, right? Innocent people weren't the only ones suffering from this document issue. We weren't the only people suffering from housing issues. A lot of people in society naturally assume that the moment you walk out after an exoneration, your record is clear. That's not true. I had to repeatedly explain to employers and landlords why there was an error on my background check. Right? Applying for jobs, I had to explain why it said I was convicted of a murder. That was a difficulty that I couldn't explain. I didn't know how to navigate that process. So understanding my own issues helped me really be beneficial to other people that I knew had to go through the same process for different reasons. So that's what brought me into the work. And that's why it's so personal to me. It shouldn't be this difficult to reintegrate back into society once you're being released from incarceration, whether you're guilty or innocent. We unfortunately live in a system where we're asking people to be successful and stay out of trouble, but not giving them the tools necessary to do it.
Thank you, Ken. Khalif, I'm going to pass it to you. Same question. How do you arrive at this work, and why? Can you explain, why is this work important to you?
This work is important to me because you go through life with an ordeal that you have no control of. Here you have a 17-year-old kid, matter of fact, 16 and a half, turning 17, faced with a life and death situation where you don't understand the law, you haven't been experienced or exposed to this level of awareness. You may be streetwise, you may be school-wise and educated, but a lot of things in life kids just do not know how to grasp because their mind is not fully developed. Here I am facing life in the penitentiary or possibility death by lethal injection for a crime I didn't commit. This journey has showed me in many forms and many fashions that this could happen to anybody in this country across the United States. Just because being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or being involved in a street area that you have no knowledge of, or knowledge of, just being out with the guys. But when you are caught in the system, you don't know how to fight, what to do, what steps to take, or how to navigate. I was thrust into a situation where as a minor being thrown into an adult situation in an adult penitentiary and say fend for self. I had the best lawyers that we could at the time that would give us pro bono help. We paid what we can pay as we go. Matter of fact, I have to give them recognition. Attorney Sam Adams and attorney Eugene Pinchman. Eugene Pinchman is not with us anymore, and Sam Adams suffers from Alzheimer's, so to speak. But these lessons in life have taught me that when you are caught in a system that you have no control of, you have to define who you are, what is your purpose to being driven to prove your innocence and to open these doors. I had no one to extend the key, no one to give me the inclination of support of what I needed at the time to come home. I had to learn on my own, struggle on my own, and interpret what the law was. I envisioned a second chance at life at a very young age because I had faith in the legal system to open this door or to correct the wrong of a wrongful conviction. Neither did I know that it would take 51 years later, from 1970 to 2021. 51 years. I could have came out a bitter man, pissed off at the world, or just didn't care because I was experiencing a trauma situation. But I chose to count my blessings, accept life for what it was, and move forward. If I had chose the left rather than the right, I would have missed all these blessings and fortunes to do what I do. So my experience behind the wall forced me to understand that education is the key, positive change is a necessity, and reinventing yourself is a must. That's what led me to this path. And as we move forward in this conversation, I will give you a better picture in detail of this journey and why I come to this stage of sharing my life struggles with you. So bear with me, and I will do my best to try to enlighten you about the prison systems, parole, second chances, and just opportunity, taking advantage of opportunity and believing in yourself.
Go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank you, Timmy, and I want to thank all of these panelists that I'm sitting alongside for giving me the opportunity to join the stage and just share in this space with so many amazing advocates, so many old friends. I'm looking out into a room of folks who I know have tremendous lived experience and are bringing that experience to the fight every day all across this country. So it's a real honor to be part of this community and to be able to share in this space. Thank you. I try to, and I will try over the course of the next hour to kind of wear different hats and bring different perspectives. One of the perspectives that I will always bring to this work is the perspective of a child with incarcerated parents. My dad did 40 years before he came home. He was put on parole in New York. He transferred to California. In the last breakout session, we were talking about transfer of jurisdictions and some of those challenges. So I've been right there with my dad. He only got out 2 years ago. The issues that we were just talking about a moment ago about identification and how do you get a driver's license. I mean, it's a remarkable thing when you think about it that the state knew well enough who my dad was for the 40 years they had him in a cage that they kept him in those cages. But somehow when he got out, he had no identification. Right? How does that work? My mom did 22 years, and I was an active part of multiple unsuccessful clemency campaigns for her, and then multiple unsuccessful parole board processes until ultimately she was granted parole after 22 years. So that's one lens that I'm going to bring to the conversation today. Another lens is that of a lawyer who went to law school. I see some of my law school classmates in the audience, to fight against mass incarceration. And when I graduated from law school, the way to do that was, in my mind, to become a public defender. And so I did that for many years, and I tried dozens of cases to verdict, and I fought all different kinds of cases. And the third lens that I'm going to try to bring is that of someone who served for multiple years as the elected district attorney of San Francisco after running a campaign very explicitly committed to ending mass incarceration, among other things. I hope that by triangulating those three lenses, I can try to bring complexity and nuance to what are very complicated topics. And I don't say that to suggest that other people don't bring that. We have a lot of different perspectives, and I'm here to learn as much as I'm here to share. I'll say one other very brief piece, just following up on the previous two comments, which is I think we all know, but we need to be really intentional about messaging and communicating to the public outside of these spaces how much the system is setting people up to fail at every step of the way. Whether you're wrongfully convicted, whether you did the crime that you were convicted of, as in the case of my parents, they were not factually innocent. We can talk about what extreme punishment looks like. We can talk about what kinds of conditions do and should exist in carceral settings. But at every step of the way, we are setting people up to fail. We're not giving any kind of rehabilitation or job training. We're dehumanizing people. We're not providing adequate health care or nutrition while they're on the inside. And when they get out, they've got to spend 6 months just to get identification. How are you supposed to get a job? How are you supposed to get housing? How are you supposed to do any of the basic things that society tells you you're supposed to do after all these decades in prison? And more than that, we're all the challenges getting jobs, challenges getting education, getting funding for those things. In California, for example, it's kind of an amazing thing as we look at the presidential election coming up and the differences between Republicans and Democrats. There's a law that's been on the books in California since 1973 that recognizes that when people are getting out of prison, public safety benefits if we give them some money. If when they get out, they have a little bit of cash in their pocket so they can have a roof over their head, a warm meal, maybe buy a clean pair of shoes and a shirt for that first job interview. And so in 1973, the legislature passed a law almost unanimously that required the Department of Corrections to give people getting out of prison $200. Not a lot of money, but it's something to get you started those first couple days. Now, the governor who signed that bill into law over the objection of the Department of Corrections that wanted him to veto it was Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan understood, as bad as he was on issues we care about, he understood that giving people a little bit of startup money when they come home after serving a bid makes us all safer. Well, 2 years ago, California passed a law that would update that $200 for inflation to about $1,500. Governor Newsom vetoed it. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that for the last 30 years, since 1994, the Department of Corrections has chosen not to follow the law. Let me say that again. The agency that is responsible for meting out punishment to people convicted of not following the law is not following the law itself. The agency that is supposed to be entrusted with advancing public safety through punishment or rehabilitation is itself undermining public safety in ways that even Ronald Reagan understood were critical. Because since 1994, it's decided in its own discretion that notwithstanding the clear language in the law that says shall, lawyers like that word, right? It makes it clear, shall, that it's going to deduct from that $200 clothes, transportation expenses, and all kinds of other things. So this week, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, the center that I lead filed a class action lawsuit against the Department of Corrections on behalf of people who were recently released from prison. And we expect that our class will include more than 1 million people because 2.5 million have been released since the Department of Corrections decided to stop following the law. And we're going to try to get people the money that they're owed.
How did I come to this work?
Yes. So how do you come to this work? And if you want to share, why is this issue around, that are already being touched on, critical to the work you do?
So I came to this work through pain and struggle. Honestly, after spending 21 years in prison, fighting for my freedom, advocating for other women, I was tired of fighting. When I came home, I really just wanted to be so simple, so basic. I wanted a job, an apartment, and a cat. That's it. That's it. That was enough for me. But I found out very, very quickly that there was no space for me out here in this free world because I was already a 3-time loser because I was just as impacted, a black woman coming home over the age of 40. There was nothing for me. There were no reentry services. There was nothing. And the reentry services that I was able to find, I live south suburbs. They were on, Roosevelt and, Independence somewhere. So how do I get from Markham, Illinois, to the west side when I haven't been on public transportation in 21 years? And I just said, it has to be more. But again, I really just want it to be basic. And I kept advocating for myself. I kept showing up at spaces saying, look at me, look at me. Look at everything that I have done. I have done everything that I'm supposed to do to succeed. I have earned this second chance that you say that you give me. And doors kept closing. And then I just finally accepted that nothing about my life had been basic. So why would I settle for being basic? I accepted that if I became small, I would continue to be invisible to society because they had already thrown me away. So why would I let them throw me away in my freedom? Very short story. I fought and I fought and I fought and presented myself. I ended up with a position at a place called the American School in Lansing, Illinois, student services representative. I got it through a temporary agency, and when I got there, the lady that sat next to me had been there since 1977. She hadn't gone back to school, and I walked through the door and I was like, I got these skills, I'm about to take over this place. It was just in my head. And the president of the school said, I see you. Not only do I see you, I'm going to hire you from the temporary agency and I'm going to make you my assistant. And I thought, oh my goodness, you know, black girl from the South Side, justice impacted. I had my own office. I'm walking around with my laptop, and I made it. I finally made it. And I hear this chatter when I'm walking, you know, through the hallways, through the building. And, you know, I got the big head, so I'm like, they're just hating on me. And then somebody came and said, LaTanya, somebody looked you up on Google and found out that you have a murder conviction from 1992. And I was crushed because, again, I had done everything that I was supposed to do. So the president of the school said, you know, you are wonderful, but I have to let you go. And I was so angry. I was the type of angry that I wasn't in prison, because I knew that. I knew that I was in prison. I knew that I had to stay there. I knew what my plight was in prison, and it was just to get out of prison. But free, what was free? I started asking myself, was freedom just the absence of me not being in prison? Or was it that I was able to really achieve everything that I wanted to achieve in this world? So I was going to sue the school, and I reached out to Mark Clements. He is a friend, really a relative of my aunt. And he and I got to talking, and he gave me all the information of what to do. And I went to Chicago Torture Justice Center for services. And I was in a room with other people who had experienced what I had experienced. I'm one of the only women to come forward as a torture survivor. Area 2, 111th. And I felt like I was at home, that people finally saw me and understood. And I declared and I decreed that day that I would no longer be small, be basic, that I would kick the door in wherever I was at. And that's what I do. I had somebody say, you know, you don't always have to lead with your story. Why not? Why wouldn't I? Because there are other people who may not have the energy, the courage. Everybody has a voice. I have a platform. I kick the door in everywhere I go. Hello, it's me, justice impacted black woman. Everywhere I go. Because what they gonna do to me? Nothing. They already did it. So I came to this work because if I don't do it, who will? If I am not transparent about the ills of incarceration and what they do to us and what they create, who will? That's how I came to this work. And that's why, thank you, that's why it is so important that we continue to fight, because somebody needs to be seen. All of us need to be heard.
Yeah.
What is the purpose of putting somebody somewhere for 30, 40, 50 years, 16 years, and then when they get out here, they can't do this, they can't have that job, they can't live here, a certain employment, they can't live by a park, they can't live next door to a daycare. What happened to the second chances?
Right.
So I still advocate, and I will continue to. And I'm going to do this work until I can't do it anymore, or, win the Powerball and But no, that's how I came to this work.
Thank you. Thank you, Tanya. We are in the presence of so much expertise on this panel, and brilliance. So I'm just relishing in that. And in the room, obviously, just there's so much here. So I'm going to go back to the end, and I'm going to pitch a couple questions that you can kind of weave together how you will. But kind of building off of this, I heard the word freedom come up a lot, right? And I think oftentimes people think of freedom as once you're out of the door. So thinking, I'd like each of you, starting back with you, Ken, if you can speak more specifically to these post-release supervision systems of mechanisms, how that impact has, impacted your life and or the community that you build with. And then a follow-up question to that you can just go ahead and weave in if you choose to, is what does this tell us about the role that these systems, supervision, post-release, are playing within the criminal legal system and our society at large?
So I didn't have to directly deal with parole because of the way I was released. However, I live, work, and operate in a community of people that are consistently burdened by the oppressiveness of the parole system. I don't mean that in the huge word that we think of oppression, but it's not designed for people to be successful, right? There's so many barriers, there's so many problems that it doesn't allow you to be successful. Things such as, I'll circle back to my first answer with the vital documents, right? You can't get a job without a social security card and an ID. You can't get housing without a social security card and an ID. But yet this is a parole condition for people leaving the Department of Corrections. In order to stay free and not violate your parole, you have to get a job. And you have to get a job within a certain amount of time, which is impossible if you have to navigate an entirely different governmental apparatus in order to gain the documents necessary. So if it takes you 6-7 months to get an ID and a social security card, and it takes you another 2 months to get a job, and then you've got to work 3 weeks before you can get a check, how are you supposed to eat? My stomach is only going to grumble for so long before I start robbing people while this process is taking place. And this is a situation where, again, we're not asking people, we're forcing people to do these things. It's not a question of whether or not you have an option to work. That's not an option. It's a requirement. You have to get a job. You have to find a place to stay. But even when people are paroled to a family member's house, that family member's house now has restrictions on what you can and cannot have in that home. Or now that family member's house is being randomly invaded by police to check the area of the parolee that is living in that house. These are conditions that create a problem for a lot of people. And it also puts people in an uncomfortable situation when you have to decide if you want that family member to be paroled to your house. Do you want to be subjected to random searches in the middle of the night because they're coming to check and make sure that person came in at 11 o'clock? Or you wake up to go to work and your driveway is blocked by police cars because they want to make sure that parolee's in the house like he's supposed to be. These are all problems that are created by a system that we would want to work for the right reasons. The justice system is supposed to be designed around rehabilitation, but it doesn't push in that direction of rehabilitation. It actually pushes in the opposite direction. When we think about the things that are necessary for people to be successful, again, going back to vital documents, you would think you want everybody to leave with an ID. One of the bigger things on a major scale that a lot of legislators in Michigan didn't consider until it was brought up during a hearing, you can be detained by police if you don't have an ID. So what can happen is you're re-traumatizing people all over again for something that they can't control. I can't control how fast my ID comes in the mail. But as long as I don't have an ID, if ever I come into contact with police, they can detain me for as long as necessary to figure out who I am. But what I never understood, and I had an opportunity to ask a very high-ranking public official in the state of Michigan, was, you took my ID from me when you arrested me. Why didn't you give it back to me when you let me go? Why do I have to spend all of this time trying to reprove to the government that I'm the person you had in custody for 16 years? Because that's what happens. When you go to the Secretary of State to try to get an ID, you have to prove to them who you are. You need 30,000 pieces of different identification in order for them to say, okay, that's you. You've got to have mail. Where am I supposed to get some mail from if I was just released 3 days ago? You've got to have a birth certificate. Where am I supposed to get a birth certificate from when you took it? It was in my wallet when you arrested me. These are all burdens that are thrust on the individual to prove. It's your responsibility to prove that. No one else can prove that for you. No one else can go to the Secretary of State for you and get an ID. No one else can verify who you are to get a Social Security card. These are all things that you're responsible for. But as we all know, and as we continuously watch the news every single day, everybody's not mentally whole. That alone is a barrier to navigating these processes that are in place. And it's restrictive. How are we helping people with all of these burdens and barriers in place? And we're asking people to stay out of trouble. We're asking people to reform themselves while continuously placing barriers in place of them. And again, I say this as someone that comes from an inner city. I come from an area that is impoverished. Most people that wind up in prison are impoverished. I'm sure everybody in here can agree. I didn't meet any rich people in prison. There's not a lot of millionaires in prison. So I'm only going to go so long with my stomach grumbling before you create a problem that you tried to avoid.
Thank you, Kim. I want to come to you now, Khalif, if you want to answer that same question. And I think there's one of the things that I just thought of that I'll just throw in there, and you can touch on it if you want. But I feel like from my knowledge and experience of your engagement with relationship to supervision, there's also a unique political paradigm that connects back to the broader politics of the tough on crime conversation that has already been referenced. So go ahead.
You know, before I go into my post-release, it is critical that you understand the steps that I took before going home. I took 51 years of not ever getting a vote for parole. Each 3 years that I was set, a set is considered, we're not going to see you again until X amount of years. There was a max of 5-year period of time where they can see you today and don't see you again until 5 years later. Fortunately, I never reached that 5-year pinnacle. I always have received 3 years. But each time you are set and denied parole, you question yourself. What did I do wrong at the board? How did I present my case? Was I clear? Did I cover all the steps that I needed? Because in Illinois, there's no parameters. There's no barriers. There's no set steps. There's no obstacle course. You say, I complete this course, and I check my boxes here, and I check my boxes here. I'm available for parole. I am a risk factor that can be accepted. That's non-existent in Illinois. It's done at a whim. It's done at the discretion of another individual. I was blessed to a degree. After the George Floyd situation up in Minnesota and that horrific scene that played out across the country, it made people question the state of the law. It made people question the facts up here when the police say these are the facts. Everything become questionable. The systematic relationships and things that was thrown at the system were just automatically accepted and never questioned or never challenged. I had an opportunity to say, let me present my case again. Let me fight a different battle as I reinvent myself. In the process of reinventing myself, I had the opportunity to take the education that I have gained over the years. My first degree comes from Lewis University in general studies. My second degree come from McMurray College in computer science. I got my paralegal certificate from state of Illinois, my business management. I have a slew of certifications. I was a peer educator for public health department, certified, teach human wellness. I was a peer educator, motivation speaker for 15 years. I had to reinvent myself each time I go to the parole board, and the parole board would say, so what? You accomplished that. It had nothing to do with 1970. And here it is, 2000 and something. What levels of accomplishment must I succeed or obtain to be recognized as a parole risk-free inmate, the opportunity to be considered for parole? Non-existent. I was charged with a police sniper murder. 2, not 1, but 2. My co-defendant was a 13-year-old. I was 17. I had 123 co-defendants right down the street from here in Cabrini Green, which no longer exists. They demolished all the projects in the state. You put a kid on the 19th floor, you say one shot, 3 football fields away from the 19th floor. Let's be for real. Who does that? In either case, when you appear in front of the parole board, they don't look at your accomplishments of what you have done or what you have changed. They look into the past, your original state of the case. And that is your problem when you step into that arena and you have an attorney trying to fight for you. That attorney must navigate between past and present and future. And that is our obstacles. My obstacle was even harder because I said, I'm innocent. I didn't do this crime. Reactionary from the parole board. That's all we need to hear. You are unremorseful. You are vindictive. You evil. You have no love for life. You deserve everything you got coming. Parole denied. Because you took the position of saying you're innocent, I didn't do this. It is hard to shake an image. You watch television like I watch television. You may watch Star Wars. Everybody know who Darth Vader is. He's the bad guy. You're not going to ever change that. If you watch scary movies, everybody know the boogeyman is in the closet. You're not going to change that narrative. Red Riding Hood, oh, here come the wolf. You're not going to change that image and narrative because it is sunk in your head that that's who you are. So when you appear in front of these parole board members and they looking at a sensational case or sensational episode of a crime, that image is not going to leave their head. It's not going to change. Big deal, you got some degrees. We don't care. Big deal, you did this. We don't care. You accomplished that. We don't care. All we're concerned about is the seriousness of the crime, what took place in 1970 versus 2000 or whatever. Everything else is irrelevant. And to make it even harder for me, I have 7 ex-police officers on the parole board, a state's attorney, and a correctional officer who was retired. 15 board members. Out of 15 board members, 9 of them is correctional officers and police officers. Where's the fairness at when they saying, we told the blue line. We're not going to break from this blue line. We support our officers. There's no fairness. There's no subjective to what's right or what's wrong because everything is done at a whim on their part. That's setting the stage. That never changes for 50-some years. Unfortunately, things change in life for better or worse. Like I said, the George Floyd thing, it put us in a situation where people start questioning authority. They start questioning the system. They start looking deeper into the systematic operation that was going on in the court system, the juvenile system, and the adult system. Here you is a juvenile being put into an adult situation in an adult correction. 50 years later, a case come up. Miller versus Alabama. For all you legal experts and my law students, understand that is the most important case that arrived in the state, in this country, dealing with juvenile sentencing. Juvenile had life, others had life with numbers, 1,000 to 2,000 years, 100 to 300. My sentence, 100 to 199 years. That opened the door for us to file for a second chance at life. A second chance to say, look at this case. A second chance to say, I am not a 16-year-old or 15-year-old. I'm an 80-year-old and 90-year-old senior citizen now. Can I get a review? Is there such thing as compassion? Is there such thing as mercy? It is often overlooked. They don't care. Illinois was the last state to recognize juvenile situations for its time in life being unconstitutional. Illinois, a blue state, supposed to be compassionate and merciful. When these doors open for me an opportunity to say, look at this case for what it's worth, it is not logical sound for me to even have a conviction. I had the greatest lawyer in the world because she took time to say, let me research this case. We lost the first time up, but the second time around, I'm better prepared. Her name is Sarah Garber. She's a bomb. She know her stuff. And we clicked on every effort, everything that we did. We was in hip, joined at the hip, mind to mind. She saw what I saw and she said, hey, you see me? I said, oh, I see you. What about this theory? We made parole the second time around. Now we can tell you about post-release and what it feels like to be released and what our parole system would look like post-release. Mind you, born and raised in Illinois, Cook County, Chicago, born in Cook County Hospital. Mother come from the South in the Great Migration in 1940. Left home at 16 and 17. Fighting for my life. Upon my release, every uncle, every aunt, my mother, my father, deceased. Coming out the door, I lost my daughter, deceased. So you tell me, upon my parole, you tell me with stipulations, you cannot parole to Cook County. Born and raised, what's wrong? You cannot parole to Cook County. One stipulation. 2, you go see a shrink, something wrong with you. 3, we're gonna put you on home monitoring for 3 months. Okay, where am I supposed to live? Oh, you can't go out of state, your intercompact request was denied. But that's for my families at Minnesota, St. Paul, etc. So what? We are paroling you, but you can't go to Cook County and fend for yourself. I stayed 3 extra months in the institutions after being released on parole. Gathered parole February 25th. Didn't go home until May 21st. Because they refused to let me go under those stipulations because I couldn't go to where my family was at. Somebody had a bright idea. Throw him out the door and put him in the northern suburbs. He'll be back in the morning. They paroled me to Waukegan, Illinois. I have never left Division Street, Clark Street, Wales, and Ohio. I used to ride my bike down here to North Avenue Beach. Left home at 16, 17, don't know nothing about the world. I left as a teenager, young adult, come back as a senior citizen. And you tell me to fend for myself. Fortunately, my third eye prepared me for success. My third eye prepared me for my release. I taught reentry behind the wall. I built programs behind the wall. I knew what to expect when you are uprooted from your demographics and move to another location. I understood the challenges that's ahead for identification. I understood the pressure that comes when you're out there by yourself. I understood if you had a problem, if you was a drug addict, if you messed with drugs, if you was involved with your criminal activity, if you returned to your gang-banging activity, the revolving door comes back to you locked in the penitentiary. I understood that because I taught the classes. I was prepared. My Social Security card was in my personal file. My birth certificate was in my cell and my photo album. So when I opened that door, give me my credentials. Let me get up out of here. But it even gets better. You have a system that says, we will let you go if you are a security. I'm talking about not a risk to society, not a detriment to society. We will vote to let you go on parole because you deserve it. You vetted me to make parole. I grant you that. Thank you. I earned it. But for those who had the courage, the parole board members that says, I vote parole, I vote parole, I vote parole. Thank you. The state said, you fired, you fired, you fired, and you fired. What you parole him for? He's supposed to die in the joint. My vote was 8-4, parole. You fired all 8 of them. And said, what were you thinking about? You done lost your mind. You cannot vote for your compassion. You cannot vote for mercy. You cannot vote for anything that goes contrary to what the system has set up. George Floyd opened these doors because he made you look. Give me my second chance. Give me my opportunity to show you that I'm not this kid from 1970, but a senior citizen of 2021. Give me my opportunity to show you what I'm made of. I didn't have no political clout. I was bankrupt politically. I didn't have no foundation. I was bankrupt community-wise. I was an activist for 15 years on prison reform. Locked down the vote for Harold Washington, who he ran for the mayor. We behind the wall voting, family, we organizing. These are the things that this institution taught me. When I holler for help, the Innocent Project said, your case is too old, we can't help you. Help me, attorney, I need a lawyer. Man, it's a cold case, I can't get this, I don't have time. I need a pro bono lawyer, I can't help this. Okay, let me take my ass to the library. I got a paralegal certificate, I know law, I studied it, let me go. My best friend was an amicus brief to my law students. My best friend was an amicus brief coming from all other institutions that was friendly to the court. I studied everything I can study by opening this door. Now that I'm here, my post-release have been ragged, rough, and adjusted. You may not catch this, some of y'all, you may be too young. I come in with communication like this. Oh, somebody caught it. Oh, you caught it. I come out and somebody said, here's a phone. Okay. How you use it? Mm-hmm. Swipe to the left. Okay, what's a swipe? Mind you now, I got a degree in computer science, but they never let us get on the internet. I never used a phone. A smartphone to me is a dumb man like me trying to use a smartphone. The technology and the change is leaps and bounds. You take a juvenile in the 70s and turn him loose into a futuristic state of mind as a senior citizen. 60 days time, I had this stuff down to a pat, knew everything about, I'm talking about two-step verification, swipe to the left, swipe to the right, record, you name it, I had it down pat. Roku. Okay, Alexa, I don't know you, but YouTube. ESPN. Okay, we good. Siri, who's you? I'm your helper on the phone. Okay, I like you, Siri. Do your wife know this? You know? And it was funny about technology. These are the fun parts of adjusting. But in harsh reality, I had to deal with job, employment, house, getting things together, holding the job down, trying to find work. And mind you, I don't have a pension like you. I don't have a work ethic. I don't have a work source. I don't have nothing. I started from the bottom and rose to the top. I fought hard for everything that was given to me. And one thing for sure that I had in my mind that it would never go away. I had every police officer, every state in Illinois, every correctional officer in the IDOC, everybody in the state's attorney office rooting against me with this message: he'll be back. We set him up to fail. He won't last 6 months. Been almost 4 years, my man. I'm still standing. I put together a hell of a team with Project Sound Off to reach back and do the things that I wanted to do, that I couldn't get the help when I needed help. When people turned their nose up and said, we can't help you, now I'm in the position to reach back and say, how can I help you? And that is this step in this journey.
Thank you, Khalif. Yes. So we're running just a little bit behind on time, so I'm going to go ahead and throw in our last question too in the mix. So Chessa and Latanya, you can go ahead and also mix this into your responses. But if you wanted to respond to that second question, as well as, you know, jump right into our last round of questions, which is really about lessons, reflections, and the road ahead in terms of key lessons or considerations when we're thinking through these issues, and you can, or models in terms of the work that you're already involved on, the work that you're involved in that kind of potentially gives us that blueprint of where we need to be going on this.
It's a tough act to follow, brother. You know, I say that not only because of how unbelievably powerful you are as a speaker and what you lived through was, but also because when you hear your story, one of the things that stands out to me, I'm thinking back to when I was a public defender, and every one of my clients who was looking at time said to me, can you get me a deal for probation? I'm thinking back to the time when I was a prosecutor, and when I would go to the parole board and say, we support parole, we don't oppose it, the press would say I was soft on crime. I'm thinking about the times when I was fighting and begging and writing letters and advocating to bring my father home through clemency and then on parole. And how much it meant when we got word that the parole board had granted my dad, when the governor gave him clemency and then he got parole. And then I zoom out a little bit and I think to myself, you know, there are more people on parole or probation in this country than there are in cages. I think to myself, as much as we're fighting to bring all these folks home, we're bringing them home not only under conditions that set them up to fail, but in a way that is part of the prison industrial complex, in a way that perpetuates mass incarceration. And so, of course, we're thankful when somebody we love gets a second chance, or when you get to come home. Of course, you fight for that, you earned that, and yet, as much as we want that for our communities and for our people, we have to remember that this is part of a system that sets people up to fail, that at the peak of mass incarceration in some states, the majority of people getting sent to state prison were not new offenses, but were technical violations. All those details, all those reasons why those people thought you were going to come home, it wasn't just because they thought you were going to commit a crime. It's because of all of the hurdles. I mean, we just watched the Olympics. How many hurdles they have to jump over? And they're young. All these things, the identification, the job, stuff that has nothing to do. Like my dad came home after 40 years and they wanted him to go see an anger management specialist. They made him do, I don't know how many anger management classes. I'm like, my dad's a lot of things, but he is not angry. He's not angry. That has nothing to do with who he is, who he's ever been, whatever his weaknesses are. My mom came home after 22 years. Some of y'all knew her. She did about 8 or 9 years on parole before they let her off parole. And she had to pay the state of New York every single month. She had to pay the state for the privilege of being on parole. I'm like, how is it that we have unlimited money to build cages? Nobody asks when it comes time to sentence somebody. When I was DA and we had to do a sentencing hearing, the judge never said, well, the sentence that you're asking for is going to cost the state this much, and what are alternatives we could consider with that amount of money. Nobody ever said that. Nobody ever said, where else could we invest that money? But as soon as people get out, not only are they being charged, they're being denied the money they're entitled to in states like California. They're being given all kinds of obstacles to success, and it's not an accident. In the breakout session earlier this morning, Ryan got to share some of the data from his empirical study looking at parole supervision. And the data that he shared with folks in that session, which I missed, unfortunately, I was in another session, but he gave me a preview beforehand, confirms what we all know. What we all know in our heart, which is that for the most part, people who are being put on parole are not being supported or uplifted. They're being set up to fail. Now, it doesn't need to be that way. People need housing when they come home. People need services when they come home. I remember when I was working as a public defender in drug court, and I had clients who had graduated, and the judge was ready to dismiss their case and let them go on their way. And they said, but judge, if you dismiss the case or if you terminate probation, I'm going to lose my housing. So we have all these mechanisms through which we make people feel lucky to be on supervision, or through which we make people depend on whatever few services or resources they get through supervision in order to just put one foot in front of the other. So I guess in terms of a lesson learned, one thing that's really, this is outside the box, but that's really present in my mind is all these fights about getting education, getting college in, my dad was teaching a class in Statesville for a long time before they closed it down. And my adoptive dad, who's here, not my biological dad, all the programs that you were able to do. We get all this political pushback on resources, on investing in people and setting them up to succeed. And one of the reasons why it's so hard politically to persuade people to spend money on basic common sense, human decency in this space is because we don't spend that money as a social safety net for people who aren't in prison either. And it's not an accident, and it's not disconnected. If you look at European countries that incarcerate a fraction of the number of people we do and have a fraction of the amount of crime we do, they have free early childhood, childhood care. My son's 3 years old. We got to pay out of pocket for his child care, or my wife or I has to stop working. That's how it works in this country. We don't have free child care in this country. If you want to get health insurance, got to pay for it. You want to get an education, got to pay for it. And so it pits people who are working hard to stay afloat against people who are incarcerated or coming home from prison in a way that doesn't make any sense. It sets all of us up as a society to be less safe, to be less humane, to be less enlightened. And so I guess I would say in terms of lessons learned, we have to find ways to keep doing the big picture work, advocating for a social safety net, advocating for the kinds of services inside and outside that actually make our community safer. We have to remember that even though it's a blessing that our people are getting released on parole, that it's still part of the prison industrial complex, that it's still a setup, that it's not actually advancing safety or justice or freedom. And then I think we also have to, I know many people in this space are doing it, and we're doing it through the center I lead at Berkeley as well, continue to do that individual work. Because as much as we want and need to think big picture about structural change, every day there's people like the people on this panel who are ready to come home. And we can't forget about them. We can't wait to change the whole system and let people behind bars just suffer there. We're doing a project, I'll just end with this, where we're deputized by the District Attorney of Alameda County, where Berkeley is located, to go to court in individual cases, many people who have life sentences, and advocate for their sentences to be reduced. And we do that in the name of the District Attorney. Last week, one of the lawyers who works for me on that project went to court, and a client who had no parole eligibility was given a reduced sentence of credit for time served. Came home. No parole, no nothing. So that's one case. That's one person. And we've got to find ways collectively to keep doing that work, even as we're reimagining and reinventing the system and building the kind of communities that we're proud to call home, that we're proud to raise our kids in, and proud to see our parents get old in. Thank you.
When I think about lessons learned.
So you can do both. If you wanted to respond to the second question and the third, just, but either.
Okay.
Either or.
What's the third you want me to?
The last one of lessons and
Okay.
models of the work.
Okay, I was getting there. Okay. So when I think about things that I have learned doing this work, having been incarcerated, I think about how now the conversation starts when police officers show up when people are having mental health crisis. I think about parole officers. They are officers. They're not parole social workers. So there's somebody yet in your life to police you, to surveil you, to tell you what you can and you cannot do. And that doesn't work. They're not equipped to deal with individuals coming home from this prison industrial complex where we have been victimized and traumatized, where there were things that we will speak of and things we will never speak of. So when I think about creating new models, I think about supportive services. I think about how all of us need individual release plans. They sent us all to prison. You could stay there 10, 15, 20 years. They don't even care if you can read. And that is the same way they release you. They just throw you back out in the community and give you a blanket parole release plan. Everybody I know with a murder case had anger management and ankle monitor. Everybody. They hadn't talked to me in 20 years. How did they know if I was angry or not? How did they determine that? They never asked me a question in 21 years. But on the date of my release, I'm angry. Well, and I was. But I wasn't the type of angry that they thought I was. I was the type of angry that you had held me here for 21 years. And now you just let me go. I left home, I left prison with more degrees than a thermometer. And when I got home, I could not attach a document to a Gmail. They taught me nothing. What is rehabilitation? They assumed that I had been habilitated and that they were going to redo it. How do you quantify rehabilitation? Somebody get 40 years, they get out, they're rehabilitated. Somebody get 10 years, they get out, they're rehabilitated. I think that there needs to be an individualized plan for people returning home. What I need is not what you need. You need to find out where I'm going back home, because 87% of the people who left an area code, a zip code, go back to the same zip code. And that's why they continue to be marginalized communities, because it's a fixed fight. Of course there are no services in North Lawndale and Inglewood and Grand Crossing. You know why? Because you didn't do anything with this person who was incarcerated for 30 years. And guess where they go back to? Englewood, Grand Crossing. And you have taken out all of the resources. There are no services. So what we need to do is create our own network of services. That is how we create a release, because we cannot go back and change that people are incarcerated. We can't go back and change that. What we can do is change. We can dismantle and create the freedom that they deserve. So when I think about models, I think about accompanying people to the Secretary of State, because that's traumatic. I was traumatized in the Secretary of State. I was traumatized trying to get a link card. I think we need to support supportive services. If you know someone who was incarcerated, you knew little Daquan at 7 years old, he was on the block, he went to prison, write that young man. You don't want to write him? Donate some clothes to a place. We have to provide the services that the state, that the federal government should provide. We have to do that. Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world. Don't just sit back and talk about it. That means that you have to do something. You, all of us, we have our part in this. Nobody's coming to save us. You own a business, hire a justice impacted person. Give them a chance. You own apartment buildings, let somebody live there who's justice impacted. We have to create the models, because what the government does is create the systems.
Thank you, Latanya. And I'm going to encourage folks to hit you up outside of this to learn about the models, because you are doing work very intensively to provide those services, and in a very in what that work can look like and should look like. This is a person that's leading that work. I want to go back to the end for this last question around lessons and where do we go from here. Ken, would you? Yeah.
I think the lessons to be learned from the parole process is that we need to make it more inclusive and less restrictive. We need to tear down a lot of the barriers and hurdles that are currently in place, and that money can be spent in different ways. Providing resources and access to people would help create a different environment. It would help create healthier, safer communities. Things such as Clean Slate in Michigan, that Safe and Just Michigan was very impactful in getting those laws changed. John Cooper, up at the top up there, was very instrumental in seeing those laws through. And to date, we're over 1 million convictions have been expunged in the state of Michigan. And it's not even about having the record expunged. It's about the stories that we hear, the impact on the people, the communities that we hear from, that enjoy the benefit of being able to live in the communities that they want to now, or being able to get that raise that they've been trying to get for years and they couldn't because a felony held them back, or being able to get their dream job now that that felony has been removed. We hear a lot about murderers and rapists and armed robbers that are eventually released from prison. But what we don't hear about is the people that plead guilty to felonies and misdemeanors in court to avoid prison. And they walk around in our communities not realizing the collateral damage of accepting that plea deal, not realizing that they are now restricted from doing certain things or don't have access to certain things because of that plea deal. The lessons to be learned here is we should be helping people and not hurting people.
So we're want to let our audience know we are 6 minutes over. I want to give one chance for very brief final comments to close us out. If you have any, Khalif and Chessa, Latanya, any last final brief comments?
Here's a thought that is posed to you. We come together on these conventions, these gatherings. We share information. We share our stories from state to state. Michigan is here tonight. We have Texas. We have Wisconsin. We have Illinois. We have a lot of people from Florida. All our stories are similar in nature, which brings these coalitions together across the state. Our society is changing. Our views on prison is changing. Our views on punishment is changing. We have gotten so tough on laws that we have forgot who we are. Our constitutional rights are being eroded daily. As we look at our coalitions, we ask ourselves, what can we do today as we look forward? You have a strong suit that you follow here. Just say, example, Organization 1. Organization 2 have their strong suit. Organization 3 have their strong suit. You have to combine your forces and fight for one law, one voice, one mind, one direction. Regardless who you team up with, you are stronger together than you are separate to make change. And to make this change, vote. Please vote. That is your strong point. And you vote for the candidate who think like you, act like you, and who's going to support you all the way to the legislative floor.
All right. Yeah.
We don't have time for questions from the audience? That's my favorite part.
Are there any questions in the audience? Okay, we got one. Let's see. Any other questions? We'll take all at once. All right, we got one over here, Brother Rob.
Thank you very much for everybody for your wonderful comments and exhortations. I'm going to make my question very short and sweet. And this is not just for these people up here, but this is for anybody in here that's got a legal mind. And I think I heard a little bit of what I'm hoping for in that clean slate idea. I want to explore that more. So I'm on parole until the year 2049. And I got to thinking when I was in prison, I read a legal brief and it said that in Texas, we don't have any liberty interest in parole. And I was like, liberty interest. So I looked up liberty interest, and basically it says we don't have any due process rights on the inside to demand release if there's some perception on our part of a violation of the Constitution. So anyway, long story short, I realized that I'm not free. Like right now on parole, if I was born with an inalienable right, I don't have it anymore. Am I crazy, or is that the truth? So if I'm not free, legally free, is the conversation about parole, or is it about something else in this country? That's the question. Because if they can strip me of my freedom legally, then is the issue about parole, or do we need to be talking about something else?
All right, well, let's keep our responses brief just because I want to make sure we make some final announcements before we cut out.
I'm open for a conversation afterwards. I just wanted to put it on the floor because I've been thinking about that a lot, and I believe that that's something that I want to get closer to. I feel like we're missing something.
You got a profound question too, Brother Robert. You're not missing anything. It's us who are missing something who have been through the system. We are not free. I'm sitting here talking to you today, but if I put this microphone down and drive to Wisconsin to get a meal, I'm locked up for the rest of my life. If I miss my appointment with my parole officer and forget to check in yearly as a violent offender, I am locked back up for the rest of my life. So what is the point of you telling me you made parole? You made parole. You made parole. And at any given time, you're locked up for the rest of your life. We are missing some because we have what we call permanent punishment laws. No matter how you look at it, legislation is the only way you change your conditions. And we're fighting in an area where we think we're making progress because you're talking about parole and the horror stories that come with it. That's not the arena. The arena is legislative control and putting the laws on the books and taking off draconian laws that continue to punish us. That is the focus.
Thank you. Any other panelists have any final words on that? All right. Well, let's give it up for our panelists. Yeah. Go.
I just wanted to say I'm at Chicago Torture Justice Center. You do not have to be a torture survivor to get services there. I feel like if you've been to prison that was torture, I will work with you. I do not tell people no for re-entry services. If you know anyone who is has come home, I make backpacks. I give them fresh underwear, socks, T-shirts, toiletries, gift cards. Please call, email me, Latanya at chicagotorturejustice.org.
Thank you, everybody. This has been so rich. I know I'm going to be walking away with so much. I'm going to speed through some just last bit announcements. One is that if you were wondering, all of the sessions today, include both all the workshops and strategy sessions, were recorded. They were not live streamed, but we do have those recordings. We're going to clean them up afterward and share them out. So if you missed one that you really wanted to, we'll have access to it. Two, for folks who are staying at the hotel, for folks that are flying later out of the checkout, you can leave your luggage at the hotel past the checkout if you need be. For dinner, we really want to encourage folks to come to the movie screening, which is taking place at Chicago Athletic Association. We'll be screening 1 Million Experiments. These are 2 short docs. One is 1 Million Experiments, an experimental documentary film that showcases and explores how we define and create safety in a world without police in prisons, produced by Respire Production and Media, Interrupting Criminalization, and Soapbox Productions and Organizing. And then 2, Calls from Home, a short documentary following a weekly radio program broadcasting messages of love through prison walls in Central Appalachia, directed by Sylvia Ryerson. Sylvia is actually here with us today, as well as Michelle, one of the stars of that short doc. And so all the directors, Michelle, and the directors of 1 Million Experience will be there for a meet and greet right after the screening. They're short. And the last piece about that is we're going to be, for folks, that's at 7 p.m. at the Chicago Athletic Association. And for folks at the hotel, we'll meet up. There'll be a meetup at 6:15. If you'd like to walk together and transit with a group, we'll have, I believe, Matthew, if you're here. He's not. He's probably at the registration table. But Matthew will be leading that walkover as a group if you want to. With that, though, you'll want to know with dinner, folks are encouraged to go on their own for dinner. Just keep in mind with time, if you do want to make that 7 o'clock, do what you got to do. There's plenty of stuff around here. You can just ask one of the hosts if you need a recommendation on that. Tomorrow we'll reconvene for our final plenary in the morning at 9 a.m. And I think that was my last comment. So thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your evening.